Hello, craftspeople. Welcome back to Yummy Plays, where Yummy plays and says smart things, I guess. If you're building stages in Miliastra Wonderland, there's a very common mistake that I found in community assets. People tend to putting every piece of data into custom variables, and honestly, that's slowing you down a lot potentially. So in this guide, I'll show you the real difference between node graph variables and custom variables, and when to use each. And thus, how to design your gameplay cleaner, faster, and more scalable. There are two types of variables you need to understand. First, custom variables. Custom variables live on the entity itself. First and foremost, custom variables are available in other node graphs. And you can also use them in the UI, like the heads-up display or nameplates. This makes them great for score values or cross-component communication. Think of collision triggers that need to read data from a passing entity, or the stage entity needs to read some data when an entity is destroyed. In these cases, custom variables act like a bridge between components. Last but not least, node graph variables. Those are tied to one node graph only. You can think of them as parameters for your node graph. And while they're, so to say, private, in that they are not accessible in other entities, you can adjust them individually for each object that implements the node graph, as long as you set the variable to public. It's basically the same concept used in game engines like Unity, which comes to nobody's surprise because Genshin is built in Unity. So whether you should choose a custom variable or a node graph variable depends on your case. But I would say it's something like this. Do you need to show that variable in a nameplate or the UI? Does another entity need to read that data somehow? If so, custom variables right. For everything else, if it's tied to one node graph, use node graph variables. By all means, custom variables are not bad. I just think they're overused. When you download assets or check the resource center, you will often see setups like this. Every single value, no matter if it's damage, speed, score, health, whatever, is stored as custom variables. Even logic-specific values that only belong to one behavior are sometimes stored here. I mean, it works, sure, but they have one major downside that I learned the hard way, and I will demonstrate that with an example of a very simple node graph that destroys an entity after a certain amount of time has passed, which is a node graph that you will reuse dozens of times in your stage. For example, to despawn projectiles that would otherwise just clutter up the scene. And let's say you want to improve on that node graph and also want to play a visual effect whenever an entity is destroyed. If you stored your parameters in custom variables, you have to add that custom variable to every prefab that integrates that node graph. If you did that with node graph variables instead, then all of your node graphs would just be automatically updated with the default value. And that's kinda why I like node graph variables better and try to use them as much as I can. What do you like? Do you prefer the flexibility of custom variables, or do you favor the extensibility and maintainability of node graph variables more? Or do you not care, as long as it gets the job done? Either way, tell me in the comments. And lastly, if you are interested in any of the node graphs that I produced in this video, you can see them here. Happy building, and see you next time.